Let's look ahead to the weekend, and of course the biggest game is tomorrow night in Columbus, Ohio State, Notre Dame. Bucks have won the last 4 matchups between these two, all of them convincingly. They'll look to extend their national best streak of 22 straight season-opening wins. Among the many storylines, Marcus Freeman making his regular season head coaching debut against his alma mater. Jerry, from OSU's perspective, I think the defense is the biggest story, right? You've got Jim Knowles. He went out, tried to fix this defense. You hired Knowles from Oklahoma State, who steadily built up the Cowboys unit in a league that is wide open and explosive. They had one of the better defenses in the country. What are you watching here with their defense matched up against Notre Dame's attack?
Okay, so studying Oklahoma State's defense, and, obviously Jim Knowles was the defensive coordinator last time him and Marcus Freeman went against one another in the bowl game. I would say they're a pressure defense. They don't necessarily sit in certain looks and try to outman you, because when you're at Oklahoma State, I don't know that that's a realistic goal. Oklahoma State has to beat Oklahoma traditionally to win a championship. So Jim Knowles certainly knows defense. To me, does he make an adjustment over coaching the best defensive players in the country, right? I mean, there's an old philosophical argument. If you don't have the best players, you have to do more. You have to trick people. You have to scheme people. If you have the best players, do you really have to do that? So to me, it's most interesting if Jim Knowles' defense looks like Oklahoma State's defensive scheme, or if he's changed because now he has the best players. He's in a crisis situation. He doesn't have anyone's patience to get this thing fixed.
Yes.
But I will say this too, big picture. The two problems with Ohio State right now, it seems, is their run game when they have to run it against best opponents, and defense. Are those not the two most physical parts of the game? And so culturally, as Ryan Day settles into this role, okay, are they going to be a tough physical team? Last time they played a Big Ten team in Michigan, Michigan was by far the more physical and tougher team at the line of scrimmage. So it is interesting here where as they start 22, it's not only Jim Knowles being physical on defense. What about the offense? You have to be able to run the ball on 3rd and short and 3rd and medium, or we're going to become a perimeter team. You give up a certain amount of things when you have the best players and aren't physical.
Right.
You can't constantly be a finesse team, even with the best players, because it's a situational game. And in 3rd and short and the goal line coming out, red zone, you better be able to run the ball.
Right. And I think that's where it gets so interesting to me with Ohio State, because kind of on paper, offensively last year, I mean, first of all, they set the Big Ten record for single-season yards per game. I mean, this was, by that one measure, the best offense in the history of the Big Ten. In Travion Henderson, he averaged more yards per carry than anyone in the country who carried the ball more than 150 times. So it's not like you don't have a really good running back. But to your point, when they needed to run the ball, I mean, the Michigan game, and you brought up Michigan earlier, Michigan is the case in point, right? Michigan was able to run the ball right at Ohio State, nearly 300 rushing yards, and the Buckeyes averaged less than 2 yards a carry in that game. I mean, so whether or not, and Notre Dame's got a good defensive front, so maybe we'll get a good gauge for this tomorrow night. But that does become the question, because it is about beating Michigan, and it's about beating Notre Dame, and it's about beating those 1, 2, 3 games a year where you get someone whose talent is equal to or at least somewhere in the neighborhood of yours. And that was where they fell short a year ago.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And again, we're coming out of camp. And, you talked to Ryan Day when we were on campus, and he had one scrimmage. He's getting ready for another one. And I was talking to him. These are Olympian-type athletes. I mean, Notre Dame and Ohio State are playing with the best players in the country, and we're playing the game in space. So, again, both these teams, I know Ohio State's going to go in with not a lot of scrimmage reps. So now offensively, how many times have they scrimmaged 3rd and short? Nobody wants to scrimmage 3rd and short. His body's being mangled and everyone's on top of one another. I mean, really, it's just such a hard thing nowadays to have a team contact ready. But Michigan found a way to do it right through the last game, and some of the other teams have done it. I'm really curious if Ohio State solves their problems, that means they're more a physical team than they were a year ago. Because if you can't stop the run on defense, and if you can't run the ball on offense, those are two physical traits.
A lot of really interesting storylines in this one. It is just a fascinating game. Cannot wait to watch it tomorrow night. Tonight on the Big Ten Network, it is a can't-miss volleyball doubleheader. First 11th ranked Purdue battling Utah. After that, defending national champ Wisconsin opening its home slate in a top 25 battle hosting in-state rival Marquette. Women's volleyball powered by Unleaded 88 tonight on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app, which gets us to today's big interview. The head coach of the reigning national champs, Kelly Sheffield, kind enough to join us. Coach, thanks for taking the time out. I know you got a big match tonight. Let's start here. You won the school's first ever national championship, as we talked about last year. In what way has your life changed in the last 8.5 months or so?
I don't know if our lives change at all. We've certainly been a part of quite a few celebrations. You know, the state of Wisconsin's really, really excited about the championship. But, you know, we're certainly excited about celebrating and having a banner drop this evening and then continuing forward with this brand new season.
Yeah, you mentioned the banner tonight, and of course you had so many really important pieces from that team last year that you'll welcome back. Lauren Barnes, Sydney Hilly, Dana Retke. What are you most looking forward to tonight when you celebrate, when you hand out the rings, when you see that national championship banner drop as well?
Yeah, because it's a unique thing because you're trying to get locked in on a great opponent.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got Marquette as a ranked team, and you're focused in on them. But here you are, you know, trying to allow yourself a little bit of opportunity to celebrate with the fans one last time and see the banner drop. So it's kind of a weird place that you're in. You know, you're certainly excited about seeing former players that are coming back and making time for this and the enthusiasm of the crowd.
Coach, in what way do you think the perception of your program has changed? I mean, it's amazing to me, right? You've been to 3 straight Final Fours. You've been to 9 straight Sweet 16s. I mean, this is a great program by any measure, but you hadn't won the national championship, and so now you have. And so in what ways, maybe it's on the recruiting trail or maybe it's with other coaches, is there a way that you tangibly can say people are looking at us differently?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, because we've been in the ballgame with elite recruits for a while, and like you said, we've been knocking on the door and been a program that's had a lot of success. The thing is about college volleyball is it's just an exclusive club that of programs that have won a national championship. I think we're like number 12. And so when you're going back, you know, decades and decades, and there's only been, you know, 11 schools prior to you that's been a part of it. It was certainly something that was driving everybody. It's important, and now, you know, but that hunger is to continue to maintain, to be one of those teams that consistently year in, year out is knocking on the door of getting to a Final Four, competing for Big Ten championships. That doesn't change at all.
Okay, so let's focus on that. I mean, you've got an incredibly talented team that's still there. And so many of them were part of this national championship last year. How do you turn the page? How do you take that group that you've got, revel in what you did last year, but now say, hey, it's a new season and let's move on and let's kind of accept and embrace these new challenges? What's the balancing act as a coach?
Yeah, because we're still, you know, we had so many great veterans the past few years. You know, some of the names that you mentioned, you also throw in a Grace Loberg, who's going to be announcing our match tonight. We're excited for her to do that. But it's people that have been playing, that have been in the lineup for, you know, most of their career. And we've got one senior, Danielle Hart, that's coming back from an ACL surgery. But most of the others that are either new to the program or just kids that are entering maybe their second season. And so we're a young team. We're running a 6-2 offense. That takes some time to develop and put the pieces together. We've got 3 new captains. So we've got some players that played on the biggest stage last year that had some success, but we're still a relatively young team. And it's going to take us some while to get this thing up and running and to make it smooth. But I love how hard the kids are working, and just hopefully every week we're getting a little bit better.
You mentioned the 6-2 offense. I know you made a change from the 5-1 to the 6-2. Explain to the layman, I would count myself among them, why you decided to make the change and what it means for those who watch the sport to understand what you're doing differently than you were a year ago.
I think you have a choice. You can either have a system and then you go get players that fit your system, or you can go and try to get elite players and create a system to leverage your talent. And that's certainly what we're trying to do right now, is leverage the talent that we have. We've got a lot of arms. We've got a lot of physicality at the net. We've got our outside hitters are 6 rotation players, so you know we don't necessarily need to DS them. And we've got 2 capable setters. And so just for the depth that we have, the talent that we have, a 6'2" makes a little bit more sense. What that is you've got 2 setters, and they're only playing half the time, the 3 rotations across the back row. And then you've got 3 attackers along the front row, and we're hoping to get a back row attack involved in that a little bit more. So the idea is to have 4 attackers versus your opponent's 3 blockers and get them hitting into space.
Let's focus on how it's gone so far. You played 2 matches down in Texas. You beat TCU pretty handily and then lost to Baylor in what was a wild back and forth match, a really good match. Yeah. What have you learned about your team to this point?
You know, it's Friday morning. We're at breakfast, and Izzy Ashburn, one of our setters, said, "How excited are you about tonight's match?" I said, I'm fired up for tonight's match, but I might be even more fired up for Monday to get back and break down some film and get in the practice gym. It's a young team. We just, I get excited about figuring things out, learning about it, and in the process of getting better. The Baylor match was a little bit sloppy match from both teams. It was, if this is, football, it would be 3 yards in a cloud of dust. I would say that was kind of how that match went. It was a lot of errors on our part, which is probably to be expected from both teams the first weekend. We watched a ton of film this week. We got back, we practiced. Hopefully the idea is for this week to be a little bit better than the last week. But a lot of exciting plays, a lot of talent. That was certainly exclamation points while we were watching. There's certainly a lot of sloppiness that we've got to be able to clean up. And, like I said, we're young. We're running a 6'2". A 6'2" is just, all the hitters and this have to be comfortable with their combinations with each of the setters. It just takes a little bit longer.
I do find it amazing. I mean, just how good Big Ten volleyball is. And I think we kind of put a fine point on it this year with the preseason poll, where you guys were chosen to win the Big Ten, and Nebraska was the preseason #1 team in the country. I mean, that to me is just amazing, right? That you have the #1 team in the country that is even picked to win their league, and it shows you how fabulous it is at the top. How does that prepare you? I mean, the Big Ten's had this amazing run of national champions here. How does it prepare you when you play in a league that good for the NCAA tournament, for the postseason?
It's hard to fathom just how good teams that finish 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th in the conference. And then, when you think out a couple years that we're going to be adding UCLA and USC, it's crazy. It's the bottom of the Big Ten is so unbelievably good. The top of the Big Ten this year, you didn't even mention, we just saw Minnesota this past weekend, and that team is legit as well. The young talent in this league, we graduated so many experienced players that have been a part of it, that have been playing big roles the past 3, 4, 5 years. The up-and-coming talent, the new talent that maybe the fans don't quite know, they don't know their names yet, but they will. The young talent in this conference is really exciting.
The Big Ten, 10 of the last 16 national titles. We mentioned Marquette tonight. Again, a really good team, a top 25 matchup, in-state foe. Give us a sense for the biggest challenges they present.
This is the fastest that Marquette has ever been as far as their set to the left pin. They've got an All-American setter, junior college setter that's come in, and through 2 matches, she looks really good. They've got a nice transfer from Notre Dame that has taken a lot of swings. Their sets to the left side are really, really fast. I mean, like I said, faster than what they've been. Certainly one of the fastest, I would say, to the left pin in the country. They've got They've got a couple middles that have really developed nicely, kind of all do everything opposite. They've got a libero that seems to be really good. Ryan is kind of like the Lou Holtz, that every time that you talk to him, he always downplays his team as we're not good at all, we're not good at all. Then you go play him, it's like, Ryan, come on, man. It's this team is really talented, and I don't see a lot of weakness to them.
You'll be at the field house tonight, but I know later in the year you're going to play Florida over at the Kohl Center in an effort to set the regular season single match attendance record. How did that idea come to pass?
Yeah. You know, it's been something that has been kind of thrown out here a little bit over the years, and it's taken me a little bit to kind of get on board with it. Both of my two previous bosses have kind of thrown that out there as getting a game over there, and you know, Katie Smith brought it to me early, right after our last season, and I said no, but you know, there's been a lot of discussion about what can we do to get volleyball more out to the public, to get more interest on television, and you know, so on and so forth. And it just felt like, all right, the time is ripe right now. I think we can fill that place. I know Nebraska, Creighton are trying to do the same thing, and so this upcoming week, you know, anything that we can do to create more. If our players are interested in it and the fans are interested in it, then let's do it. But I think we're pretty close to a sellout right now.
Coach, I want to leave you with this. I find your backstory really interesting in that you didn't play volleyball. Yeah. You're from Muncie, Indiana, which has produced some great volleyball coaches. Yourself, Dave Shondell, obviously, Craig Skinner, who is at Kentucky. What got you into it? How did you get from a guy who didn't play volleyball growing up to one of the elite coaches in the game?
You surround yourself with a lot of really good people that know what they're doing, and you ask really good questions, and you listen, and it can kind of take you some places. But Ball State is a teacher's college. There's a lot of people that, you know, they've got a men's team there, and so a lot of people that played there, that went to school there to become teachers, so they understand the idea of fundamentals and patience and teaching rather than just coaching through your personality or through emotion and force. It's surrounding yourself with a lot of really good people, and so many of those talented coaches are still there today, coaching at the junior high and the high school level, and a few of us were fortunate to, you know, went the route of college coaching and have had some success. But you named just a few people there, but that list could go 20, 30 deep if we had the time for it.
Well, amazing story. Congratulations to you on all of your success in helping elevate the game. I know we are huge backers of volleyball here at the Big Ten Network. Been fabulous for us, and you have been great as well. Thank you so much for your time, Kelly Sheffield, and best of luck tonight against Marquette.
Thanks a lot, Dave. Thanks for having me on.
Loaded Week 1 continues tonight in the Big Ten. Michigan State hosting Western Michigan. That game is at 7 Eastern. Then it's the Hoosiers and the Illini over on FS1. Season opener for Indiana. Illinois already 1-0 after easily topping Wyoming. Jerry's back with me now. How big an advantage is it for the Illini that they have played a game and IU has not?
I think coming out of camp, we thought maybe Illinois was further along in their preparation for the first game. And then to add what you just asked, I think it's a really significant advantage to have your team already have played a game with a new quarterback, with a new offensive coordinator. There's a lot of reasons why that game was really beneficial for Brett Bielema in Illinois. On top of that, you have a new organization playing for Indiana or coaching for Indiana, right? You have Tom Allen calling the defensive signals and also being the head coach. You have Walt Bell, the first-time offensive coordinator. So you look at those two staffs, they're almost as opposite as it could be, right? I mean, one's already had a game and another hasn't had a game, and it's a conference game, and they have a new signal caller on both sides of the ball. So there's some challenges there. You know, I think Indiana's favored for the game, you know, and I think that says something that a lot of people that study the games think that they have a real good chance to win the game.
It's interesting, too. You mentioned not only does IU have 2 new coordinators, they have 5 new assistant coaches in all. And then, you know, we had Tom Allen on yesterday, and we were talking to him, 13 transfers they're integrating in. And this is just the norm, right? I mean, this is just what it's going to be, I think, here going forward. But I'm interested in your thought, and I asked Tom about this earlier, yesterday, and I know you heard it. You heard his answer. But how tough is it to integrate new players when you are, and everyone's trying to build a culture. I'm not suggesting that Tom is different in trying to build a family atmosphere, but it really is, it's such a point of emphasis. I mean, it's every single interview he ends, right? It's like with LEO, well, how can you L people who you just barely met, right? I mean, I think that's tough to do when you're a culture builder. How hard is that in this day and age?
Not as hard as it was maybe a year or two ago, and certainly not as hard as it's going to be the next 4 or 5 years. Because the next 4 or 5 years, someone's going to say, I'm coming to your school, and you both are going to know it's not for 4 years, right? I mean, and so culture building is a little bit different. Now, Tom made the point yesterday when you interviewed him, hey, we recruited a lot of these guys, and they said that, and they decided to go somewhere else. And so we do know them. In fact, some of the families have been on our campus. And so when we were sitting in Tom's office before the practice that we went to, he was explaining how they had these group meetings and how he made the defensive linemen have dinner or lunch, whatever, with the quarterbacks.
Right.
And a lot. So he's adjusting to the culture. But culture is the most overused word in college football. But it's always evolving. And again, in 3 or 4 years, you know, it's just going to be coming this year, Coach.
Yes,
yeah.
and we know it can be done because we saw Michigan State a year ago, which parlayed the portal into a fabulous year, 11 wins. So now they try to follow up on that starting tonight against Western Michigan. What interests you there?
Well, maybe Mel over-delivered, I think, so quickly. What jumps out at me about Mel is it's hard for us to really get a feel. We didn't see really a practice. We saw a walkthrough. But he's one of those guys that knows exactly what he wants. I mean, it's black and white. I mean, it's this way. And so to me, the biggest challenge at Michigan State, and I think this is historic at Michigan State because of Michigan, Notre Dame, and all the Midwestern schools, it's going to be about recruiting. He's going to coach the heck out of them, right? And it's just if he has the right players and how he uses the transfer portal. And I think he was the first one to explain to us, because of his NFL background, he's got 2 recruiting offices, right? One's the portal, which is free agency, and one is recruiting, which is the draft. And so things are pretty set in stone with Mel. If he gets really good players, he'll win a championship.
Did a great job last year, won a lot of close games, 4-0, and games decided by 8 points or fewer. It's hard to replicate that year over year, but we'll see whether or not they're able to pull it off. Back on Big Ten today with our big stat brought to you by Gatorade. Maryland opens its season at home tomorrow against Buffalo. Non-conference home games have been good to the Terps. They have won their last 5 by an average of more than 6 touchdowns, outgaining their opponents by nearly 300 yards per game. And again, hoping to replicate that tomorrow in a game you can see here on the Big Ten Network. We are joined by head coach Mike Locksley. Lox, really appreciate you taking the time on the eve of a game. What are you most excited about with this team as you prepare to take the field with them for the first time?
I think the biggest thing anytime you have game one is just kind of seeing exactly what kind of team you have. You know, sometimes as you say, it's like you can't see the forest amongst the trees as a coach. You really don't know what you have until you play a game. And, you know, I know this. I like the locker room. I like what we've seen out of this team through our 26 practices of training camp. But now it's time to kind of go see what this year's version of the Maryland football family looks like.
Well, we got to see one of those 26 practices, and it was awfully impressive. I mean, all 4 of us came away really, really impressed with the progress that this team has made after a very good season a year ago, one in which you made it to a bowl and won a bowl game convincingly. I think one thing that has jumped out to us as we've come to Maryland through the years, in this transition to the Big Ten, it feels like the line of scrimmage has been the biggest challenge. And that offensive line seemed to have really taken some strides this year. How have you seen that group come together?
Yeah, it has not been just 1 year. You know, you think in 2019 coming in, I think at least four of the guys that are starting for us were playing very significant roles. You know, take a Jalen Duncan, for instance. In 2019, he was a redshirt freshman. And as we all know in this game, it's one in the trenches, especially in the Big Ten and the Big Ten East, where you've got to be able to maintain the line of scrimmage and win at the line of scrimmage. I just think the 3 years in the O-line is the one area where it's the toughest to expedite the growth of that unit. And the only way they get better is by playing and learning all the intricacies that go along with the experiences they gain. And as I've said before, this group was much maligned early as young players. They've learned from those things, and I've really liked the way that each year they've gotten better and better to where now they're the most improved unit on our team, and they're going to play a major role in what this season looks like for us.
They certainly appeared to be, when we were there, a group which it would frighten people to think is going to be improved as well is your passing game, because now you're healthy where you weren't last year. But, you know, Leah set all kinds of school records for passing a year ago with a banged-up receiving crew. What is your message to that group as Dante Demas and Jay Sean Jones come back and add them to Rakim Jarrett and Jacob Copeland? I mean, it's a loaded unit.
I think the big thing is that if you're one of our better players or a guy that we deem a playmaker, you've got to show up in games. You've got to make the plays that are there to be made. And, you know, this group has done that over the years. We've got, you know, veterans like Jay Sean Jones and Dante Demas that have done a lot around here over the years. And throwing a Rakim Jarrett, who from the day he stepped on campus during that COVID-shortened year came onto the scene and made big plays. And with the addition of a guy like Jacob Copeland and Ty Felton's development, we really feel we're six deep of guys that are starter-like players for us. You throw the tight ends in there, Corey Dyches and CJ Dupree. We know that we have that ability, and with the quarterback we have to throw the ball. But one of the point of emphasis for us is to make sure that we have the complementary run game that complements that group.
Right, you mentioned the run game, and I would say when we were there, it was not clear to us who would end up as your starting running back. I see Roman Hemby ended up first on the depth chart, so presumably your starter when you step on the field against Buffalo tomorrow. What ultimately separated him?
Yeah, he'll be the first out of the stable with the running backs, and I think, as always, you know, my background with coaching that position is that most high school guys, and because of these guys, the youth that they bring, they're used to running with the ball or catching it. But the one area that they have to make the biggest strides in early is the pass protection piece. And, you know, with Roman, we have a comfort level with him of understanding how to protect our quarterback and do those things, as well as the value he brings as a receiver in the passing game. And not that those other guys don't do it. You know, Kobe McDonald played a lot of football for us a year ago as that second/third back. The way Antoine Littleton came on into the bowl game, you know, you throw in the true freshman Ramon Brown. We feel we've got four guys that are all capable. We'll continue to put them in the positions where they can have most success early and develop the other parts of their game so that we feel comfortable to play any of them at any time.
Coach, no secret you have to get better on defense. You gave up nearly 39 points per game in conference play a year ago. What gives you the confidence that you will?
Well, I think, one, it's because we're healthy. You know, a year ago, unfortunately, we lost key players like Darrell Chami, Fanaje Gote, Deontay Banks, Jacorian Bennett, all for long spells of the season on defense, and we were forced to play some younger players and put them in some tough situations. But those guys being healthy, with Brian Williams in the front of the room and the job he did the last two games when we made the change at D coordinator, there's a lot of confidence in him. The addition to the defensive staff of guys like Lance Thompson and Wes Neighbors, along with Henry Baker, feel really good that they're much more aligned on that side of the ball. With the health of those guys we talked about that got injured a year ago, that we should be able to take that next step on the defensive side of the ball, and I think that's going to be really, really important for us.
Coach, we've talked a lot about penalties and turnovers with your team through the years. Last year, you committed the second most penalties in the Big Ten. You were 13th in turnover margin. You're going to play a lot of close games, and when you have a team that is going to be in close games, how do you work on those things at the margin that could decide whether you win or you lose?
You're right. That's what we call our margin of error. And the number one thing you want to do is, I've talked to our team about, good teams don't beat themselves. And sure, we need to prepare for our opponents and make sure we have a good understanding of the schemes they run and the personnel they have. But ultimately for us, it's going to come down to Terps versus Terps. Are we doing the necessary things to play good, clean football, disciplined football, limiting mistakes, limiting big plays? And, you know, that's been a point of emphasis for us throughout the spring and training camp that, you know what, if we want to be the type of team that we all want to be, it starts with taking care of the things we can control. And so that's been a big emphasis. We've got a veteran group that I think has really bought in. And now it's a matter of going out and executing at that type of level.
How do you do that? I mean, how do you practice not to have penalties? How do you practice not to turn the ball over? Kind of what tangible form does that take?
Well, I mean, number one, as most of us do, we got referees at every practice, and we keep and track the penalties. And I know this, it's kind of what John Wooden said back in the day. If you want to make an emphasis on something, the bench is the sweet elixir. And so if a guy's a guy that's making a lot of penalties and busting a lot of things, we'll just have to put him on the bench and have the next guy ready to go.
Give me the quick scouting report on Buffalo. What do we need to know?
You know, they've got 15 transfers from Power 5 institutions. They're well coached. You know, Coach Lindquist has been around good football with the Dallas Cowboys, Texas A&M, Michigan. We really don't know what to expect because of so many moving parts and new guys that come in. And so what we've got to do is be prepared to make adjustments and, like I said, focus on the things that we can control. I know this. They've got, you know, some returning players. They're Mike linebacker. They're D tackle. And we expect to see 2 quarterbacks. And it's going to be really important for us to try to get off to a fast start here at home and execute at a really high level.
Well, Locks, we are really excited to see this team back out on the field tomorrow. Excited to have them here featured on the Big Ten Network, and really pleased that you took the time to join us. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate you guys for having me, man.
All right, that is Mike Locksley, head coach of the Terps, and again, part of our football doubleheader tomorrow on the network. That game followed by Nebraska looking to bounce back against North Dakota. Coverage starts with Big Ten Tailgate, 10 a.m. Eastern, live from Lincoln and Chicago. That is tomorrow right here on the Big Ten Network and on the Fox Sports app. Nebraska back in action tomorrow against North Dakota. This after falling to Northwestern in Dublin. Have that big game against Oklahoma looming in 2 weeks. Pretty good crossover schedule. Indiana and Rutgers from the East, in addition to a visit to Ann Arbor. They'll try to end a 7-game losing streak tomorrow, all by single-digit margins. It is the first time that has ever happened in the history of college football. You come home, a rabid fan base, Jerry. It'll be interesting to see kind of what the tenor is surrounding this team. How do you circle the wagons now if you're Scott Frost? Kind of how do you get this thing pointed back in the right direction?
Well, you have to address the rabid fan base, right? I mean, the trick and the challenge for young people is when they're saying all these good things about you, if the same person says bad things about you and you've accepted the good things, it's tricky. Yeah. So you have to address the noise, right? You have to somehow internally explain if the fan base is rabid, it's very important to them. Don't take it personal, and let's move on. You have to address what everybody's talking about, the onside kick. Now, you study the game tape. The onside kick was very well planned out. They had checked it out the previous plays, and they had it set up. It was no different than running a play off tackle and then throwing a play action pass it off tackle. It was set up. Now, whether it was the right decision is another story, but it wasn't executed. But I can understand why they called it. I think I would explain that to the team. I would not underplay, which might be more popular now than maybe back in the day. I would not underplay motivation. I mean, I think not tricky motivation, but something that you wouldn't do an ordinarily weak, bad second half, right? So let's practice for an hour, go in the locker room, and come back. I mean, just something to get the players away from the distraction and the focus on something. So come up with some motivational plan. And for goodness sakes, run the quarterback in the spread offense. One time, I think the quarterback came off the mesh.
Well, they brought Smothers in to run it, right? I mean, Smothers had a 7-yard run, and so you say, I mean, you think about that game last year. I mean, look, they're 2 totally different teams. I mean, they ran for 420-something yards against Northwestern, and that mesh play was a huge part of it. Northwestern literally could not defend it. And now you totally take it out of the game plan and you run for 110.
Right, and again, this idea that both offensive experts, right, Scott Frost and Whipple are on the sidelines, and who's upstairs? I mean, I think the game's changed, but one thing that hasn't changed, you can see a lot more from upstairs than you can see down on the sidelines. But for some reason, most play callers want to be downstairs now. But this is unusual because Scott wants to call a run and Mark Whipple wants to call a pass and all that. So I think there's some growth that has to be done done there. I'm thinking let one of them do both, because that didn't look like it worked all that good. You know, a lot different than what Michigan's trying to do. I think this is different because the head coach is involved.
I mean, to me, though, you know, if you don't turn the ball over 3 times and you don't give them a short field on the onside kick, you win the game. I mean, offense, like, they gained over 6 yards of play, right? I mean, it wasn't, I don't know. I mean, they didn't run it to the degree that they've run it historically. I don't know. It's going to be fascinating. These next 2 weeks are fascinating. You get overmatched opponents. You got to win. You got to win convincingly. And then I think you got to figure out a way to beat Oklahoma.